One day I was home, doing some work, listening to music, and I get this text message. It's from the Grand Sheik, and it reads, Dirty Moor's holding up Cosmo L and 77 Facts now. So I respond, wow, what they saying about it? I'll email it to you when I go on break, he says. 40 minutes later, the email comes in. Open it up, click on the link, and I'm led to this YouTube video titled No More Moors. AmenRa Squad Up, Mossy Warrior Clan, posted by The Real Black Atheist on August 22nd, 2016. Let's check this out. All it took was 12 minutes, and I was like, and so I send the Grand Sheik a text and comment, watching it now. I think I want this one. And I will only use Dr. Ben. So here it is. The Dr. Ben video addressing the AmenRa Squad.
And other Moor bashers.
So first off, let's get a few preliminaries out the way. Who is Dr. Ben?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I was a bit taken back at this short introduction. I was beginning to relax, and he said, Fred de Paris, so here I am. My function this evening is rather pleasurable in that my life has been spared to be able to introduce a noted lecturer, Dr. Joseph Ben Yackerman, who was educated in Brazil, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. He received his doctorate in cultural anthropology in Cuba and a second doctorate in Moorish history in Spain, in addition to a law degree.
Hold up. Did he just say what I think he just said?
He received his doctorate in cultural anthropology in Cuba and a second doctorate in Moorish history in Spain, in addition to a law degree.
Yep, he sure did.
He is also an architect. His vocations have been as varied as his academic experiences. For example, he practiced law and he was a civil engineer in Puerto Rico. And the next voice you will hear is that of the notable Dr. Joseph A. Ben Yackerman. Please stand.
most worshipful Grandmaster, your officers.
All right, so now that we got that out of the way, just to recap, Dr. Ben is the only scholar that has a doctorate in Moorish history. A doctorate is the highest level of education one can attain. So technically speaking, Dr. Ben is the only scholar who is qualified to talk about Moorish history and Moors. Not this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or this guy, etc. And definitely not this guy, or this guy, or this guy, and definitely not this guy, etc. Whew, that was a long setup. Alright, so let's address this video.
So let me jump right in, man. I don't want to talk out of death. I just want to get really on this, man. Let's get right into the statements, man. Let's go on page 15. All right, let's get it in real quick. It talks about, it says, certainly the African American children's heroes led their African ancestors, the Moors, into Iberia was none other than the illustrious General Tariq. Okay? It says the man in whose honor the Rock of Gibraltar is named. All right? I want to get right back to this again. This is what Dr. Ben says, and that's kind of critique his statement. He says, certainly the African-American children's hero, right, that led their African ancestors, the Moors, into Iberia, was none other than the illustrious General Tariq. Now, he doesn't get into specifics on who Tariq was. He's calling him the African, which is cool. Because if you've been in Africa for 7,000 years, you're definitely an African. But we have to get into exactly what a Berber is, all right? But for this particular statement, right, if he thought, like they tried to use it in that debate with Brother Reggie, if he would have thought, right, that the African American were Moorish Americans, right, he would have made this statement. He would have said, certainly, right, the Moorish American children's hero that led their African ancestors, the Moors, into Iberia was none other than the illustrious General Tariq. He didn't say that. He said the African Americans, right? So what he was really trying to lead to was let you know that in Spain, right, there were Africans too, sub-Saharan Africans there. That's all he was saying. He wasn't saying that we were Moorish Americans. That's how they tried to use this reference, out of place. And for that, that's that pseudo, all right? So we got that straight. So once again, Dr. Ben was not saying that the Africans and Americans were Moorish Americans. He simply said, right, that some of your ancestors, right, sojourned into Spain, which is absolutely true. If he would have said that we was Moorish Americans, then that would have been a good reference to use. So whoever tried to use that reference is out of order and misreading the material. And for that, we call that pseudo.
All right, so let's get to this. In Calib and Alubaera, presently known as Trinidad and Tobago, we have a saying. Hey, Sadis, yeah, nah. Common sense was made before book sense, you know. So let's use some common sense. That's like saying, Dr. Ben said 1 plus 1 equals 2, but 2 is not the sum of 1 plus 1 because that's not what Dr. Ben said.
That's that pseudo.
Once again, common sense was made before book sense. And we are not saying that African American is a nationality. It isn't. One can't be from 2 continents. Hence, Chinese American, China equals the country / nation, and America equals the continent / geographic location. Russian American, Russia equals the country / nation plus America equals the continent / geographic location. Sudanese American, Sudan equals the country / nation plus America equals the continent / geographic location. Moor American / Moorish American, Morocco equals the nation plus America equals the continent / geographic location. Common sense was made before book sense. But wait, there's more. What Dr. Ben did in those few lines is he made African American, African, and Moor all synonymous for the time being. I say for the time being because Dr. Ben goes into what specifically a Moor is in his Black Man of the Nile book in the glossary section, and we will get to that a bit later on. Now for the second brother's information. Notice that he never presents any information from any of Dr. Ben's books. Why? Probably because it contradicts everything that he states. Then, at the 44:20-minute time mark, the brother says, you can't use common definitions or contemporary definitions and place them on people in the past. You can't do that. What you have to do is go to that time period and see what the people are calling themselves or what people around them are calling those people. You can't go to the dictionary of today and use a modern dictionary for things in the past. The world doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. If that is the case, doesn't that hold true for these same brothers retrograding the word black to identify original people of the past when black is a word from the 1500s? Then at the 51:33-minute mark, the brother comments on what is a Moor. He states, a Moor is basically a name given to people that some people have taken on the continent of Africa. It is a name given to people from the outside that some people on the continent have taken on. Well, let's see what Dr. Ben says about if we were calling ourselves Moors.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
Hold up. Did he just say what I think he just said?
We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
Yep, he sure did.
We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
Oh, and notice he said, after we lost power in Spain, we were calling ourselves Moors. By him saying we, he is including himself.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
Then he details out the different ways we spelled Moors. Dr. Ben says M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
Interesting how similar M-A-U-E-R is to the word M-A-U-R in the Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary, Volume 1, page 266 by E.A. Wallace Budge. The definition? Palermo Stele, the title of the High Priest of Anu. And we still haven't gotten to the connection the Moors had to Egypt yet. But wait, there's still more. If Moor is in the Egyptian hieroglyphics dictionary, that means that it's on the walls of Kemet. And if Mauritania bears the name of the Moors, that means that the land was named after them. People named the land, not the other way around. So if, according to some in the AmenRa squad, the Europeans gave us the name Moor, how did the Europeans put the name on the walls of Kemet and give it the meaning Palermo Stele, the high priest of Anu? That's a question you can ask the AmenRa squad the next time you see them. Anyway, getting back to the question, what is a Moor? Let's go to Dr. Ben's book, Black Man of the Nile and His Family, and check out his glossary section on page 79. The definition of Moors, according to Dr. Ben, is African Muslims from Mauritania and Morocco mixed with Arab Muslim invaders from Arabia. Also, Africans of any place who were Muslims when the Portuguese invaders entered Africa in the 15th century CE. So let's check some of the areas in Africa where the African Muslims were in the 15th century CE. All right, so we have the Almohad dynasty, the Almoravid dynasty, the Ghana Empire, and the Mali Empire. So that's pretty much all of Northwest Africa and West Africa. So if your present position is that your ancestors were kidnapped on the shores of Africa and brought to the Americas, chances are extremely high that your ancestors were Muslim, because supposedly the African prisoners came from Western Africa. So I guess that's why in the Roots miniseries from 1977, Kunta Kinte was doing this.
What you doing? When you gonna quit that? You know white folks don't like that kind of praying. Sooner or later you're gonna have to forget that African stuff.
And saying this,
I ain't never gonna be no Christian man.
I know that.
Won't never eat pig meat.
I know.
and greeting with this.
Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam.
How about that now?
Don't be talking the old ways. Only make the trouble.
Shumandinka?
Mine are the Akan people.
Makes sense to me. So according to Dr. Ben's definition of Moors, that would make pretty much all that came to North America from Western Africa Moors. Considering that an estimate of 12.8 million prisoners were taken from the 1600s to the 1800s, and the vast majority were taken to Brazil, it is also reported that 30% of those taken to Brazil were Muslims. But that is Brazil. That is not North America. If we go by these images of where African Muslims were in the 15th century CE, that would correspond to present-day Senegal and everywhere above. And if we analyze the distances needed to be traveled, It makes sense that the vast majority of prisoners went to Brazil because it is closer to Africa. And it also makes sense that 30% were Muslims because the Muslim communities were farther away from Brazil, while the non-Muslim communities were closer to Brazil. And if we consider that in the 1600s, sugar was the major commodity and sugarcane plantations were booming, so much so that Cromwell from Albion, aka England, was snatching up the Irish as well as his fellow Englishmen and sending them to work on the plantations in the Caribbean and in Brazil, it would make sense that the majority of African prisoners would be taken to Brazil. Bringing the African prisoners to North America, that journey was much longer, at least half the distance longer. So if it took 3 months to get to Brazil from West Africa, it took 4.5 months to get from West Africa to North America. And if we look at the proximity of Africa to South Carolina, the closest area would be the west coast of Mauritania. Matter of fact, all the African regions closest to North America at that time were Muslim areas. So it makes sense that in cultural genocide, he said that the African American children's ancestors are Moors. Common sense was made before book sense. In addition, Dr. Ben's spelling of Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, and Moors, M-O-O-R-S, coincide perfectly with Mauritania and Morocco.
We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
1 point for Dr. Ben. Zero points for the AmenRa squad. Then at the 1 hour, 4:06 minute mark, the brother comments, "No, black people did not rule Spain. That is a myth." For once, I have to agree with him. Quote unquote, black people did not rule Spain, Moors did. But assuming he meant black Moors or African Moors, let's see and hear what Dr. Ben thinks.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711.
Hold up. Did he just say what I think he just said?
After we lost power in Spain, the Africans ruled Spain from 711.
Yep, he sure did.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711.
2 points for Dr. Ben. Zero points for the AmenRa squad. Then, at the 1 hour 15:10 minute mark, the brother comments, "So the whole American Moors premise is based on bullshit. It's a sham. It's flim-flam. It's a house of cards." Not according to Dr. Ben's cultural genocide on page 15. 3 points for Dr. Ben. 0 points for the AmenRa squad.
And Dr. Ben wins with a devastating third-round knockout to the AmenRa squad.
Now that we're done with the AmenRa squad, let's deal with the other Moor bashers. Let's go to Dr. Ben's Black Man of the Nile and his family and go to page 332. It reads, in analyzing this aspect of the indigenous Africans of North and East Africa's high culture, particular its zenith, one has to remember that a later group of indigenous Africans of Northwest Alkebulan (brackets Africa), called Moors, have preserved much of their ancestors' teachings in the works confiscated by the Greeks and Romans from the Egyptian and Nubian mysteries system, which European and European American educators and others very much later have notoriously misnomered Greek philosophy. So what can we decipher from this? Point 1. Alkebulan is another name for Africa. Point 2. Moors have preserved much of their ancestors' teachings in the Egyptian and Nubian mysteries systems. And point 3. The Greeks and Romans confiscated the Moors' ancestors' teachings from the Egyptian and Nubian mystery systems. Now here's something to consider. When Dr. Ben writes, Moors have preserved much of their ancestors' teachings, whose ancestors' teachings is he referring to? Does he mean the ancestors of the Moors? Or the ancestors of the North and East Africans' high culture? Fact is, it does not even matter, because either way you look at it, both of their ancestors' teachings were preserved together in the Egyptian and Nubian mysteries system, according to Dr. Ben. So let's find out what relationship the Moors had with the Egyptians and Nubians. Let's check out what Dr. Ben says on the very next page, 333. African Moors, not Arab Moors, extensive knowledge of ancient Egypt and Nubia was due to their constant cultural exchanges with their Northeast African brothers and sisters through the diplomatic relationship which existed between both groups. Wait a second. Their constant cultural exchanges with their North African brothers and sisters through the diplomatic relationship which existed between both groups? So according to Dr. Ben, the relationship between African Moors and Kemet was like, and the relationship between African Moors and Kemet and Nubia was like, so why do these brothers keep pushing the message of division? But hey, it gets even better. Right below that first highlighted area, Dr. Ben goes further to explain that it was the Arab Muslim invaders that stole the teachings from Egypt. See for yourself. It reads, many of the works the Moors recorded were unknown to the Greeks and Romans. Most of them were stolen from Egypt and Nubia by Arab Muslim invaders who also sacked the depositories of learning of the Nile Valley high culture, as did their predecessors from Persia, Assyria, Greece, and Rome. So, wait a second. How come this guy, and this guy keep saying that Moors stole from Egypt and... Oh, I get it now. They keep putting out the general message that Moors stole from Egypt, never specifying which Moors stole from Egypt. I wonder why. Since they all keep saying they studied under Dr. Ben, and that Dr. Ben is the scholar of all scholars. And Dr. Ben clearly states that it was the Arab Muslim invaders that stole from Egypt and Nubia, not the African Moors. That's strange. Maybe these guys just missed that part of the reading. And common sense should tell you that if it was the Arab Muslims that stole from Egypt and Nubia and sacked the depositories of learning of the Nile Valley high culture, according to Dr. Ben, it must have been the Arab Muslims, not the African Moors, that sacked the depositories of learning of the University of Genet in ancient Ghana, destroying it in the process. And this is after we fell in Spain. So, ask yourself this question. Why would African Moors destroy the University of Genet in ancient Ghana, a university that they built, when that wasn't in their nature, yet the Arab Moors had a history of doing this with Egypt?
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S. From 711 until 1485, 774 years, when we built and brought into Europe the university system, building the University of Salamanca, S-A-L-A-M-A-N-C-A in Spain, a copy of the University of Genet from ancient Ghana, which was equally a copy of the University of Sankore in Tombouctou, which the French later called Timbuktu.
Let's read a bit further down. It reads, "It should be also noted that a number of medieval European scientists and members of other disciplines, such as Copernicus, Roger Bacon, and Johann Kepler, received much of their basic understanding from the researches they made when they became in contact with the original treatises on science which the Africans of Northeast and North Africa originated and developed, and from works which the Moors introduced to the Europeans when they entered the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portugal, southern France, in around 711 CE, under the command of the African general Tariq, for whom the Rock of Gibraltar is named. True, the Arab Moors and Berber Moors also contributed in this respect to the Europeans, but they followed the African Moors." Well, what do we have here? Turns out that General Tariq was an African, not a Berber or an Arab. So why does this guy insinuate that General Tariq was a Berber?
Was none other than the illustrious General Tariq. Now, he doesn't get into specifics on who Tariq was. He's calling him the African, which is cool. Because if you've been in Africa for 7,000 years, you're definitely an African. But we have to get into exactly what a Berber is, all right?
It also turns out that there were African Moors, Arab Moors, and Berber Moors, and that it was the African Moors that first entered the Iberian Peninsula. So how come these guys constantly say that the African Moors only followed what the Arabs did when Dr. Ben says otherwise? Let's move on to the very next page, page 334, and read what Dr. Ben says about Islam, the religion. It reads, "Many have confused the Moors' religion, Islam, as being synonymous to Arab people as a physical group. There were two groupings of Moors, the Africans, who were the first to conquer the Iberian Peninsula in around 711 CE or AD 89 AH with General Tariq, and the Asian Moors who followed them 12 years later in around 723 CE or 101 AH, the year after the Hegira or Hejira." So wait a second. How come these guys constantly say that Islam is an Arab religion when Dr. Ben says that is not the case?
Come on, son.
Let's move one more time to the glossary section, but this time on page 75, where we find the definition for Africa. The definition of Africa, according to Dr. Ben, a Greek and Roman name given to the continent originally called Alkebulan by its indigenous peoples. Other names which the early Europeans used for this continent are Corphi, Amonis, Ortegvia, Ethiopia, Libya, Oceania, etc. Well. What do we have here? Turns out, according to Dr. Ben, Africa is a Greek and Roman name given to the continent, and the continent was originally called Alkebulan by its indigenous peoples. This is really interesting, because these guys keep saying that Moor is a name that the Europeans gave us when Dr. Ben said
we were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
And these guys constantly call themselves African when Dr. Ben said African is a Greek and Roman name. Well, in the immortal words of Capone Noriega, here's some more irony for you. In Dr. Ben's description of Africa, he says that originally the continent was called Alkebulan by its indigenous peoples. So why don't these guys call themselves Alkebulanians rather than Africans? Right below the description of Africa is the description of Alkebulan. And it reads, the ancient name of Africa by the Moors and Ethiopians. If we combine these two descriptions, we learn that Moors and Ethiopians are indigenous peoples of the continent of Alkebulan, aka Africa. But these brothers constantly say they are not Moors, but Africans, and want to bash us when we say we are Moors, when that actually falls more in line with what Dr. Ben is saying. Now let's go to Dr. Ben's book, Africa, Mother of Western Civilization, and go to page 480. It reads, it must be remembered that the father of European history, Herodotus, described the originators of the mysteries system as being similar to any of the people called Negroes in the United States of America, or Bantus in the African continent. Even those later on called Moors fit this description. Now this is extremely interesting. Dr. Ben states that even the father of European history says the originators of the mysteries system are similar to the people called Negroes in the United States of America, or Bantus in the African continent, even those later on called Moors. Bantus are Moors? That falls in line with what this African scholar was saying in this interview.
Seven different groups, which are called subculture groups, and Europeans call them tribes, have the same linkage. They come from the same ancestor. You could link them actually, just like I tried to show in the article about ancient Ngana. If you could see in ancient Ngana, all the so-called tribes, most of them can be traced back to the connection between the Moors and the Hausas. To be sincere with you, the Moors identify themselves, first of all, as Bantu Ethiopians. The Moors identify themselves, first of all, as Bantu Ethiopians. The Moors identify themselves, first of all, as Bantu Ethiopians. And secondly, the Moors are dispersed group of Azanians. They are found in Ethiopia, if you want it that way. They are found in Ethiopia. They are also found in Nubia. They are also found in Ngana today. Some of them may even be found as far south as Ngangula province. But the Moors, if you study their history very closely, they are mentioned also in the biblical narrative. They are actually in the biblical narrative referred to as Moabites. They were the inhabitants of Canaan.
So, Dr. Ben just said that Negroes of the United States of America, Bantus of Africa, and Moors are all the same people, which means that the so-called Negroes of the United States of America and Moors are the same people, which means that the so-called Negroes of the United States of America are Moors, according to Dr. Ben. So when Moorish Master Adab Taj Tariq Bey told this brother on the street that Dr. Ben knew we were Moors, that's what he was talking about, and just echoing what Dr. Ben had written in his books. Now let's go to page 546. It reads, Western historians continually try to impress everyone that the Moors were an Arab people, carefully forgetting that they were two types of Moors. The African Moors, the first to enter Iberia in 711 CE with Tariq. There were amalgamated African Asian Moors, the offsprings of African and Asian Muslims. The Asians, originally from Arabia and other areas around the Fertile Crescent, entered Iberia 12 years, 723 CE, later. So according to Dr. Ben, there were amalgamated African Asian Moors, the offspring of African and Asian Muslims. The Asians were originally from Arabia and other areas around the Fertile Crescent. So when this brother on the street asked Moorish Master Adept Taj Tariq Bey if Arabs were Moors, and Brother Taj answered yes, they are amalgamated, that's what he was talking about, and just echoing what Dr. Ben had written in his books. So there you have it. And just to recap, according to Dr. Ben, the African American children's ancestors are Moors, which makes the African American children Moors. And if they are Moors and born in America, that makes them more American/Moorish American. Africans ruled Spain, and the European never gave us the name Moor. We were calling ourselves Moors.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S.
Moor, M-A-U-R, is on the walls of ancient Egypt, and it means Palermo Stele, the title of the high priest of Anu. It does not mean black. Moor does not mean black. The definition of Moors, according to Dr. Ben, is African Muslims from Mauritania and Morocco mixed with Arab Muslim invaders from Arabia. Also, Africans of any place who were Muslims when the Portuguese invaders entered Africa in the 15th century CE. African Moors preserved the ancient teachings of their ancestors in the ancient Egyptian and Nubian mysteries systems. African Moors had a great relationship with their Egyptian and Nubian brothers and sisters. African Moors, not Arab Moors, extensive knowledge of ancient Egypt and Nubia was due to their constant cultural exchanges with their Northeast African brothers and sisters through the diplomatic relationship which existed between both groups. Arab Muslim invaders sacked the depositories of learning in Egypt, not the African Moors. Many of the works the Moors recorded were unknown to the Greeks and Romans. Most of them were stolen from Egypt and Nubia by Arab Muslim invaders who also sacked the depositories of learning of the Nile Valley high culture, as did their predecessors from Persia, Assyria, Greece, and Rome. General Tariq was an African Moor, not an Arab Moor, not a Berber Moor, and the African Moors were the first to enter the Iberian Peninsula, Arab Moors coming 12 years later. Islam was not a religion synonymous with Arabs as a physical group. Many have confused the Moors' religion, Islam, as being synonymous to Arab people as a physical group. There were two groupings of Moors: the Africans, who were the first to conquer the Iberian Peninsula in around 711 CE or AD 89 AH, with General Tariq, and the Asian Moors who followed them 12 years later in around 723 CE or 101 AH, the year after the Hegira or Hejira. Africa is a Greek and Roman name given to the continent originally called Alkebulan by the indigenous peoples, and Moors are indigenous to Alkebulan. The quote-unquote Negro, Bantus from Africa, and Moors are all the same people. Asian Muslims are amalgamated Moors. It's interesting how no one wants to deal with Dr. Ben's Moorish history PhD. You bring up Dr. Ben and quote what he said about Moors, and certain Moor bashers never address it. They just be like. So to all you Moor bashers out there, all the information that we've presented here was straight out of Dr. Ben's literature. We did not twist any of the information, as you were able to read it for yourselves. So if you have a problem with the information, challenge Dr. Ben. And for all you other Moors out there, instead of wasting time debating these brothers, just put Dr. Ben's info on them, and the debate will be over in less than an hour. Oh, and peace to these two brothers here, especially this brother who is constantly trying to put the proper timelines into perspective when these Moor bashers keep saying that the Moors were the biggest African slave traders, and him constantly trying to unify all sides using terms like Black Moor in his presentations. And supreme honors to Canaanland Moors' present-day Moorish master adept teachers, in no particular order. And to our beloved Dr. Ben. Rise in power, Dr. Ben. Supreme honors to you from Canaanland Moors. Peace, love, and light. So with that said, to the Moor bashers,
fresh, but
Dr. Ben,
you suckers!